in the United States. He's a speaker, he's a writer, he's a political analyst. There's no one better to go to ask what's happening on the US political scene. And he joins me now via Skype. Caleb, thanks for coming on the show.
Sure, always a pleasure to be here.
Now, let's start with the breaking news that the multi-billionaire Bloomberg has joined the Democratic Party race. How does that compute?
Well, it's certainly not a surprise, because anyone who paid attention to the Democratic debates that have recently been happening has been hoping that some kind of wild card could be played. It seemed almost like the Democratic Party at this point has a strategy of boring the American people into voting for them. Really, the fifth Democratic Party debate here this month, November, was the most boring debate people have seen in a long time. These impeachment inquiries taking place on Capitol Hill are also quite dull. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is a reality TV star who knows how to keep the American people watching his every move, tuning in, keeping them excited. So you had to wonder, what were the Democrats going to do to try and get some more interest in their side of this upcoming presidential election? Because the American public seems largely bored by what they have to offer. Now, perhaps there's some psychology there we don't understand. Perhaps boring the American people somehow will subtly get into their minds and get them to support them. We know the Democrats have lots of millionaires and billionaires backing them who research this kind of thing. But perhaps Bloomberg's entrance into the race, Bloomberg, the former mayor of the city that I'm in right now, New York City, perhaps that'll make the Democratic camp more exciting and interesting to the American public.
Well, I mean, let me ask a question which is obvious, at least over here, but perhaps that's our ignorance. How does a billionaire like Bloomberg qualify as a Democrat? Most people in this country, Britain, imagine that the Democrats are vaguely like Labour, blue collar, for the poor and the minorities and so on. This man had a shocking term of office as mayor of New York City, didn't he?
Well, indeed, and he wasn't a Democrat when he was here in New York City. The Democratic Party of New York City, you can go all the way back to the Tammany Hall machine, and it's very much, the institution, the ruling institution in New York City. When Bloomberg came in, that was seen as a continuation largely of the Giuliani leadership, where it was, the Democratic Party, the labor unions, and the Tammany Hall Democratic Party leadership in this city kind of being challenged. But Bloomberg is very liberal, very associated with LGBT rights, very associated with environmentalism. But at the same time, he was very, very strongly opposed to laws that would require a minimum wage for contracted companies that did business with New York City. He very famously compared such a law requiring companies that did business with New York City to the Soviet Union. Basically, he said that we can't have a guaranteed wage. We can't require companies to pay decent wage because, look, the Soviet Union fell. So clearly communism is not the answer. Very bizarre. He also got quite a bit of flack for an ad campaign in the subways of New York City urging teenage mothers not to have children. And the ads were particularly harsh, and they seemed to almost target ethnic minorities. People saw them as almost Malthusianism. These ads basically urging, low-income people and ethnic minorities not to have children, kind of shaming teen mothers. That was quite a controversy. Also, he's known worldwide for the infamous soda law, restricting the size of soda that you would drink and soft drinks. But he was also known for being quite harsh on the Muslim community of New York City. Bloomberg being an outspoken supporter of Israel, and the NYPD having to watch a very anti-Islamic film called The Third Jihad in their training, a film that was widely criticized by even strong supporters of U.S. foreign policy. The Bloomberg administration is associated with a lot of things that many liberals in New York City and elsewhere wouldn't be particularly fond of. However, Mayor Bloomberg is trying to show that he's more of a liberal Democrat. He recently went to an African-American church and apologized for what was one of the key policies of the New York City Police Department under his leadership, which was stop and frisk.
No, I mean, it's very easy. It's very easy, Caleb, to be liberal about to the working class on wages and conditions and so on. We know that kind of a liberal here. But how much of his own money is he going to put into this race? On my Twitter feed, we'll try and get Caleb back, because I'm fascinated by the entry into the race of Mayor Bloomberg, and wondering if that forecloses the possibility of, believe it or not, a rerun by Hillary Clinton. Because many people whose views I respect were very strongly of the view that Hillary Clinton was about to enter the race. The argument would be, look, these seven dwarfs and Bernie Sanders are just not going to do it. We need some big star quality. Joe Biden is 20 years past any star quality that he might once have had. None of the other new stars that they predicted have risen to the challenge. And so if we're not careful, the argument would go, we'll end up with Bernie Sanders. And if Bernie Sanders wins, well, we'll be the Soviet Union, to coin a phrase. So we've got Caleb back now. Let me ask him that question. Caleb, I'm wondering if Bloomberg's entry forecloses the possibility of a Hillary Clinton rerun. Most people find that almost unbelievable, but a lot of people thought that it might well happen. Does it foreclose that right for a start?
It seems to. The forces that would have wanted Hillary Clinton as the Democratic nominee and as the presidential candidate seem to be putting themselves behind Bloomberg. Now, earlier, there was talk of a run by Howard Schultz, who's the owner of Starbucks. And Bloomberg very famously said that he would back Howard Schultz if Bernie Sanders got the nomination. That Howard Schultz and Bloomberg both said that Sanders was unacceptable, that they would do everything they could to defeat Bernie Sanders. And it seems Bloomberg entering the race is an expression of the anyone but Bernie sentiments among a lot of very wealthy Democrats who don't care for Trump, but they're far more afraid of any kind of social democratic or populism from the left.
How much money will Bloomberg put into this, and will that money make a difference, Caleb?
Oh, it'll certainly make a difference. People talk about how expensive U.S. elections really are. One thing that really illustrates what we're talking about here is if you watched the previous debates, if you turned the sound off and just listened to the, looked at the expressions on the faces, when Bernie Sanders was talking and saying things that in a lot of Europe would just be common sense, like people should be given health care and people should get education, people shouldn't be in student debt. As he was speaking, you saw this smirk on the face of Elizabeth Warren and on the face of Joe Biden. They're just smirking there. They have just utter contempt. They're almost kind of laughing, almost snickering. They don't take this seriously. And you would think, okay, maybe they're laughing at Bernie Sanders, but reality is they're laughing at their base because average Democrats think a lot like Bernie Sanders. Polls show that. The rank and file of the Democratic Party agrees with Bernie Sanders, not with Hillary Clinton and not with Mayor Bloomberg. And the Democratic Party elite, the DNC machine, very much has contempt for the people who vote for them over and over and over again. And this tension is what contributed to all the controversy surrounding 2016. I was at the convention. I saw it, where people were protesting in the convention about how it had clearly been rigged against Bernie Sanders. There's a lot of tension within the Democratic Party as it's controlled by a group of people who believe in economic neoliberalism and privatizations and war on unions, and the rank and file of the Democratic Party that really do believe in free health care, free education, organized labor, better pay for teachers, all kinds of things that Bernie Sanders stands for, and they smirk and have utter contempt for from the leadership.
Now, will Bloomberg coming in push some of the, I called them maybe unkindly, the Seven Dwarves? I say that in this race, the Seven Dwarves and Bernie Sanders. Will any of those Seven Dwarves, you don't have to own that phrase, fall out now that Bloomberg has come in?
Well, we shall see. It seems like, if you'll notice, Kamala Harris, if you watched the last debate, it almost looked like she'd aged 10 years since the previous debate. I mean, she's still recovering from the Tulsi Gabbard takedown that she endured, where Tulsi Gabbard called out Kamala Harris for the fact that she tried to keep an innocent man on death row, that she was basically the queen of the military or the prison industrial complex when she was running California. And she, came on the debate stage and she gave her rebuttal or response to Tulsi Gabbard. And it was like all she had on her was, God forbid, she had met with Donald Trump. Oh, my goodness, she had criticized Barack Obama and his foreign policy. And it showed that Kamala Harris, who was someone that many of the people that I'm sure are now backing Bloomberg had put a lot of faith in, this former prosecutor and now senator from California, Kamala Harris seems to be finished. The poll numbers show that she is just not of interest any longer. They weren't particularly nice to Tulsi Gabbard. They've accused her of being a Russian operative. They weren't particularly nice to Andrew Yang either. And Andrew Yang is another candidate that seems to be out of favor. He got less than 7 minutes, I believe, on the debate stage, whereas Bernie Sanders is now a pill that they almost have to swallow. They have to allow him because he has so much support among rank-and-file Democrats. This is going to be an interesting race. Now that Bloomberg is in, the Democratic side seems to have some possible interest in it. But Bloomberg, many people in the city that he ran it during the Occupy Wall Street protests. He oversaw the brutal crackdown on Occupy Wall Street protesters. This is a man that has a lot on his record that many rank and file Democrats approve of.
Final question, and I'm grateful for your time as always. How will Trump be viewing all of this? Who would he most like to fight, and who would he least like to fight? Unfortunately, we've...
Sorry, can you repeat the question? You seem to have broken up there.
Again, we'll try and get back to him. Here's the polls. 13% of you think Ghislaine Maxwell is dead. 51% of you think she's in Israel. 36% think she's working in Woking in Pizza Express. 488 votes in so far. You can vote on my Twitter feed. We've got Caleb. I want to finish that question, Caleb, if I may. Who would Trump, how is he viewing all this? Who would he like to fight? Who would he least like to fight? And will he even be still standing by the time of the election, now that they're trying so hard again to impeach him?
Well, I think that Trump would very much like to run against an establishment Democrat, because Trump's entire image is that he's a maverick, that he's a wild card, that he's fighting the status quo. He's, turning up the apple cart and draining the swamp. And Bloomberg is somebody that Trump knows very well. I mean, where is Trump's real estate career? Where does that come from? Here in New York City. So I think a Trump-Bloomberg race is something that Trump would be very well prepared for. However, something coming from the left, someone who could also have that kind of maverick and rebel image, but coming from the left, is something that Trump might not be as prepared to go up against. We know that during the 2016 election, Fox News desperately tried to organize a Sanders-Trump debate, and the Trump camp wouldn't have it. They just wouldn't have it. The idea of Trump and Sanders on the same stage together is something they were terrified of happening. And I think that fear is still well within the White House and within the Trump camp.
Will he survive the impeachment challenge, Caleb?
I think he will. I don't think that the Democrats have the energy in their side to remove him from office. But that said, things have been changing in the USA very rapidly, right? It may be that things rapidly shift. But as it stands currently, the energy to impeach Trump is coming from the Democratic side. But the Republicans still have the Senate majority, and they don't seem to want to remove Trump from office.
Caleb Maupin, as always, a pleasure, an honor to have you on the mother of all talk shows. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Now, earlier this week, as is my wont, I did a short stand-up for RT, this time on the extraordinary statement by Mike Pompeo, the US Secretary of State, which said that the illegal settlements by Israel of the Palestinian territory in the West Bank were not actually, after all, illegal. Here's what I had to say. Take a look. This is a matter of international law, and nothing that Mike Pompeo or Donald Trump can say can change that.